The most brutal night since this war began just fell on Israel like a meteor of fire and destruction. 5 million people running to shelters. 5 million. While you read this, while you breathe, 5 million human beings locked underground, while the sky over Tel Aviv becomes a hell of metal and smoke. This is not a threat. This is not an escalation. This is wave number 91 of Operation True Promise 4, and what I am going to tell you in the next few minutes is going to completely destroy the narrative that the Western media has spent weeks building. Because while Donald Trump was celebrating at the White House, promising that Iran would be sent back to the Stone Age, Iranian missiles did not stop. They multiplied. They became more precise, more devastating. And the most terrifying thing of all is what the Revolutionary Guard commander said less than 24 hours ago: stay until the end, because what comes next is going to completely change how you understand this war. Just a few hours ago, the sharpest and most prolonged sirens Israel has heard since the start of this conflict began sounding simultaneously in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in Beersheba, in dozens of cities at the same time. Emergency loudspeakers activated, alert systems triggered, and the image that swept the world in real time: Israeli citizens running, pushing, crying, flooding en masse into underground parking lots, into residential bunkers, into shelters that Israel has spent decades building for exactly this kind of catastrophe. 5 million people underground within minutes. That is what wave number 91 achieved before the first missile even fell. And the missiles fell with a force that the Israeli media, usually calculated and restrained in their transmissions, could not hide. This time, the cameras of international journalists in Tel Aviv captured something that weeks ago was unthinkable: the direct impact of a ballistic missile in the middle of the city. Rescue workers digging through the rubble of a destroyed building. 2 civilians pulled out alive from the remains, while the sirens sounded again and the rescue teams themselves had to stop the search and run for cover. That image, that moment of total chaos where reality crushed propaganda, is what the major media is hiding from you. Here I am not going to sell you a narrative built to protect geopolitical interests. Here I am going to tell you what is actually happening. And the first thing you need to understand is that the entire scenario Donald Trump constructed in recent months, that narrative where the United States and its Israeli ally have Iran practically subdued, that they have destroyed 90% of its military capabilities, that the Iranian regime is on the verge of total collapse. That narrative received the most demolishing blow in its history precisely yesterday. Because Ibrahim Jolfagari, the commander and spokesman of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, did not come out crying, did not come out asking for a ceasefire. He came out to issue a warning that ran cold through the blood of every military analyst in Washington. What Jolfagari said was this: do not waste your time trying to calculate how many missiles we have left. You have not the remotest idea of where we are hiding them. You do not know how many more we have stored right now, and we are going to keep launching them. No hesitation, no diplomacy. A declaration that directly contradicts the official White House narrative, which for weeks has been assuring that Iran is exhausted, that its arsenals were decimated, that the combined pressure of the United States and Israel has them with their backs against the wall. The Revolutionary Guard commander had just called the entire Western media apparatus a liar to its face. And wave number 91 was the brutal demonstration that he was not bluffing. But there is something you need to know about who is ordering these attacks right now. Something that changes absolutely every analysis of this war. Since February 28th, the Islamic Republic has faced this conflict under a transformed command. The joint operation that eliminated the supreme leader 5 weeks ago did not stop the Iranian military machine. It radicalized it. With Mojtaba Khamenei at the head of the supreme leadership and the Revolutionary Guard carrying more real weight in war decisions than at any other moment in its recent history, Tehran is not negotiating. It is responding with everything it has. And what it has, as Wave 91 demonstrates, is considerably more than Washington wanted the world to believe. Now let me describe the geography of this destruction, because the coverage of Wave 91 was something that Israeli military analysts themselves described as unprecedented. Ben Gurion Airport attacked. That is not a symbolic target. It is the logistical heart of the State of Israel. Tel Aviv under direct impact. Haifa, the country's second most important port, receiving another round of high-powered ballistic missiles. The military bases of Hatzarim, Tel Nof, Nevatim, and Beersheba, recording impacts on high strategic value installations. The enormous craters left by those projectiles are not potholes you patch in a week. They are scars in the soil of Israel that speak of an attack capability the Pentagon has spent weeks insisting was destroyed. But what made the commanders of the Israeli army start making emergency calls in the middle of the night was another target. It was what Iran and Yemen declared they had attacked in a coordinated manner. Dimona, the Dimona nuclear complex, Israel's best-kept secret for 6 decades, the place where the atomic arsenal exists that the Hebrew state never officially acknowledges, but that everyone knows is there. When the Revolutionary Guard and the Houthis of Yemen coordinate simultaneous attacks on a nuclear site that officially does not exist, we are in territory of first-level international crisis that no 20th century strategy manual contemplated in its full dimension. Right now you are thinking something. You are thinking, if the situation is this serious, if Iran is really attacking with this intensity, why am I not seeing it in the major media in all its rawness? The answer to that question is exactly the reason you are here and not there. What is happening contradicts the script carefully built since Washington launched its operation against Iran, the script that says Iran is losing, the script that says American bombardments destroyed the Persian military infrastructure, the script that says Tehran's threats are empty propaganda from a dying regime. Showing Wave 91 in its full magnitude, the craters in Tel Aviv, the fires at Israeli military installations, the 5 million people running to shelters, would mean admitting that script is false, and nobody in that media machine is prepared to assume that cost. But the Israeli media themselves, the Tel Aviv television channels that for months presented every Iranian attack as minor damage, could not avoid acknowledging it. This time, journalists in live transmission describing the impact behind their own backs, headlines talking about widespread destruction, first responders pulling out bodies. When the media of the affected side itself cannot sustain the official narrative, you know what happened was absolutely real, but something is still missing. Something bigger, and it is about to reach you. Now, I need to tell you something that goes far beyond missiles and sirens, something that reveals the true state of strategy from Washington. Because while Iran launched its most devastating wave, something was happening inside the Pentagon that nobody is telling you. General Randy George, a veteran of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, one of the most decorated and experienced military officers in the entire U.S. Army, was fired. He did not resign voluntarily. He was forced out. And the reason for that departure reveals something deeply disturbing about how military decisions are being made in the Trump administration at this precise moment. Pete Hegseth, a former television commentator with no real military background, now heading the Department of Defense of the world's leading power, presented General Randy George with the outline of a ground invasion of Iran. And Randy George responded the way any serious military officer would respond, that it was a logistical insanity. Think about it coldly. A ground invasion of Iran. Where do the fleets enter? Through the Strait of Hormuz. We are talking about 33 kilometers of water, under Revolutionary Guard control, with underwater mines, with fast boats operating in those waters, with a mobility that destroyers cannot match, with missiles that reach targets 1,000 kilometers away from Iranian coastlines. Every vessel that attempts to cross that strait becomes a floating target, and if they manage to land troops and cross the Persian Gulf, the real problem begins. You need hundreds of thousands of soldiers for a ground invasion to be militarily effective. You need the complete logistical chain, munitions, food, camps, supplies, all of it advancing through terrain where Iranian defenses have spent decades preparing for exactly that scenario. Randy George saw it, analyzed it, said it out loud, and that is why they removed him. What does that mean for this war? It means that whoever takes General Randy George's place will be someone who will not question orders. Someone who will nod yes, even if the plan is strategic suicide, a Voss with a general's rank. And that, combined with the ground invasion plans circulating in the Pentagon, should concern you more than any missile you saw explode on screen this week. Because a ground invasion of Iran is not resolved in months. It is resolved in years, in decades, with a human and economic cost that no public official in Washington is prepared to put numbers to out loud. And the Iranians themselves know it. Tell your troops, they say from Tehran, come closer, we are waiting for you. While all of this is happening, there is something that Iranians have proven with this war. Something Washington seems not to be calculating sufficiently. Iran is being hit hard. Yes, the bombardments on its installations, its bridges, its military targets, its naval fleet are real. The longest and tallest bridge in Iran, the one connecting Tehran to Karaj, destroyed. That is undeniable. But there is an enormous difference between being hit and being defeated, and the Revolutionary Guard is demonstrating that with every wave. That is not what an army does that has lost 90% of its arsenal. That is what an army does that still has something stored away, that still has real capability, that has the will to keep fighting. And now the information I promised you at the beginning, because there is a chapter of this war that the major media buried under layers of institutional silence. Iran launched hypersonic missiles against a United States military installation, missiles that travel at speeds that conventional defense systems cannot intercept, missiles that by the time radars detect them, it is already too late for any response protocol. The footage of that explosion exists. The damage reports exist. And the silence surrounding that episode from Washington is not carelessness. It is a calculated decision. Because publicly admitting that a U.S. military base was successfully attacked by Iranian hypersonic missiles would change the entire narrative of who is winning and who is losing, and nobody in the West Wing of the White House is ready for that conversation right now. There is something Iran has demonstrated with this conflict that is perhaps its most powerful card on the table. Drones. Small, cheap, difficult to intercept in saturation. Each one costs between $20,000 and $50,000. You can produce them in large quantities. You can transport them without the logistics a ballistic missile requires. And they are destroying defense systems that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Sophisticated radars, anti-missile batteries, state-of-the-art technology installations. The asymmetry of that economic equation is something Pentagon strategists understand but do not want to discuss in public, because it implies admitting that modern war has fundamentally changed, that the technological advantage of Western powers can be methodically eroded by adversaries who produce cheap weapons in industrial quantities. And here is where Yemen complicates everything in a way Washington did not calculate sufficiently. The Houthis formally announced their incorporation into a coordinated operation with Iran across multiple simultaneous fronts. This is no longer Iran attacking Israel in a bilateral conflict between two identifiable actors. This is an active regional coalition that disperses threat vectors simultaneously. When the Israeli army has to simultaneously manage ballistic missiles from Iran, drone attacks from Lebanon, and projectiles from Yemen targeting nuclear installations in the Negev, the saturation of the defense system is not a theoretical possibility. It is what is happening in real time as you read these words. Now, there is a factor this war is revealing that changes the fundamental geopolitical analysis. Trump's European partners said no. Italy, Spain, and the United Kingdom refused to participate in the conflict. NATO watches from the sideline. And that fracture is not a minor detail. The Gulf monarchies, which for decades depended on American protection as a shield against Iran, no longer trust that shield to work with the same effectiveness. When the leaders of the Gulf observe that the most powerful force on the planet cannot effectively protect its closest ally, they begin to make their own calculations. They begin to think that Tehran is not the adversary you want to provoke without a clearly defined victory plan. Iran's power in the region, its real influence in the Persian Gulf, has grown during these weeks to a level it did not have before the conflict began. That is what the analyses of Washington's own think tanks say when they believe nobody is taking notes. Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, Elon Musk, the brains behind the operations board at the White House, men who built a strategy on the premise of accelerated Iranian capitulation, of a regime that would collapse under combined pressure, that the Revolutionary Guard would enter a spiral of panic and disorganization without its historic leader. That premise was wrong, and Wave 91 is the bill arriving to collect on that miscalculation, because the Revolutionary Guard is not in panic. It is operating, it is coordinating, it is sending missiles with an effectiveness that weeks ago would have seemed impossible given the level of damage their installations received. There is a figure that the Israeli army has not been able to hide this week: the craters. We are not talking about minor damage to civilian infrastructure. We are talking about ballistic missile craters, excavations in the ground that speak of the kinetic power of projectiles traveling at supersonic velocities and detonating with a force no structure was designed to absorb. Those craters exist in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in the military bases of the south. The images circulate even as official communiques try to minimize them. Asphalt does not lie, rubble does not lie, and the 5 million people who spent hours underground yesterday do not lie either. This happened. This is real. Today, while the world debates whether Iran has offensive capability, the question nobody in Washington wants to answer out loud is one single question. Is this plan working? We are entering the 5th week of the conflict, almost the 6th, and there are no real signs of de-escalation, no serious diplomatic conversations in any visible channel, no credible mediators sitting at any table. The Europeans, who could have played that role, said no. China observes in silence, calculating its advantages, and Russia, which has its own interests in keeping the United States trapped in the Middle East, has no incentive to intervene in favor of a quick peace. The stage is set for escalation, and if the ground invasion plans that General Randy George rejected end up being implemented by someone willing to say yes without measuring the consequences, we will not be talking about weeks or months. We will be talking about something that would redefine the map of global power for decades, with a cost in human lives that nobody in this moment dares to calculate. Before you go, I have to leave you with the question I want you to answer down in the comments, because in the next 72 hours, the move that changes everything we thought we knew about this war may occur. Iran just demonstrated in Wave 91 that it is not exhausted, that it has missiles, that it has regional coordination, that it has the determination to attack Israeli nuclear installations. Trump has one fewer general. He has NATO watching from the sideline. He has Europe telling him no. He has the eyes of China, Russia, and the Arab world on his every move. The question that no analyst can avoid at this moment is this: what does the executor do now? Does it escalate towards something from which there is no return? Or is there a secret negotiation that no outlet is reporting yet? A silent channel between Washington and Tehran that nobody knows about? Because in wars like this, the most important moves never happen in public. They happen in the conversations nobody sees, in the agreements signed when the camera is off. Leave your analysis below, activate notifications, and stay with Professor Jian Wei Explains, because what comes in the next few hours could change everything we take for certain about this war today.